Why so many video game companies blow their budgets and delay their games, while developers working on the games feel like this.
Fuck! Fuck! I can't fucking do this anymore!
Meanwhile, people who manage the projects seem to act like this.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. That's okay. Things are gonna be okay.
If that sounds familiar, don't worry, you're not alone. As we record this video, it's January 2021, and despite its massive successes and growth, the video game industry still struggles massively with bad product and project management. Of course, managing creative projects is not easy, but there is a trend in the industry that really pisses me off. You see, certain companies, instead of trying to make things better, they actually take this weird sense of pride in their shitty way of work, and they even make it a part of their culture, and they repeat things like, "This is what it takes to achieve greatness." And I can't really agree with this, because what would be the nice way to put it? I can't agree with this because it's fucking bullshit, fucking bullshit, fucking bullshit. You see, the reality is there are great games that were made in a shitty way, but those games are great despite being made in a shitty way, not because of it. So let's stop this dangerous, ignorant nonsense, because there is a better way to make games. And in this video series, I want to show you how. Hi, welcome to Game Jitsu. I'm Matt Binkowski, and you might be wondering who is this schmuck and why you should listen to anything I say. That's a fair question. So here's a short intro. I've been in the industry for 10 years now. I had a chance to work with big AAA games like Dead Island and Dying Light. I also worked with not so big games like Pure Farming, God's Trigger, Torment Tides of Numenera. And I also worked with super tiny games like My Brother Rabbit or Hotshot Burn. I also work with games that you've never heard before because they got cancelled and teams making them got disbanded. If you want to check details of my career, there's a link to my LinkedIn profile in the description below. Anyway, throughout the years, I was given a lot of chances and I had the opportunity to work with truly amazing people. I'm absolutely grateful for all the chances I was given. I also made a ton of mistakes and I'm pretty sure I pissed off a lot of people. But in the process, I've also learned a lot. So this video series is my attempt to give back to the world in hope that it will make your life easier, it will help you make better games in a more efficient way. Specifically, I'd like to talk about video game production process, pinpoint the most common issues, and show you how to fix them. All right, let's do it. The problem we're dealing with is pretty complex, so it's gonna take a few episodes to talk over all the details. So in this episode, I want to focus on getting to the root of the problem. Okay, so what are the stages of production process? Talking to a lot of developers over the years, I've noticed that way too many of them talk only about two stages: production and pre-production. And the reality is a little bit more complex than that, but we'll get to that soon enough. For now, let's focus on what we have here. Maybe it will sound a little bit strange, but I like to focus at the very end of the process on the production stage. And the reason for that is because that's where most teams find themselves in trouble. You see, this is a stage where the ship should be sailing full speed ahead, but the team is constantly finding themselves in trouble. And it's simple situations like the story got rewritten from the scratch again. A feature that's supposed to be implemented doesn't have design ready. Or gameplay that was supposed to be exciting is actually boring.
Fuck.
Or even worse, you can't really implement any content because the tools and pipelines are not ready.
Fuck.
You could think that's because the production stage is where all the elements of the game come together, and that makes this stage the most difficult part of the process. But that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, production stage is actually the easiest.
No. It's not true.
You're just doing it wrong.
That's impossible.
Search your feelings. You know it to be true.
No!
Okay, but I'm not here to bust your balls. I mean, maybe a little, but I'm here to help you. So let's talk about what the production stage is all about. What is the goal of production stage? The number one objective for production stage is to make content for your game. That's it. Period. And it's a race. The whole process of making a video game is a race. So you want to get through it as fast and as efficient as possible. And there's numbers of reasons for that. Number one, every day, ton of new games come out. And each one of them could possibly do what you intend to do. And then your game is not so revolutionary anymore. You see, what you thought was revolutionary when you started, a few years later when you release, it could just be standard. Number two, your audience gets old. I mean, you know, they grow up, they get jobs, they get married, they have kids. They either might not have time to play games anymore, or simply your game is no longer relevant for them. Number three, the hardware gets old. And so eventually it gets replaced with a new generation that raises the quality bar. So if you spend years and years making your game, you're at a risk that you release an old game with no audience. Number four, it's really expensive. And maybe that's not something you really think about a lot when you're just a developer sitting in front of his desk and doing his job. But think about this for a moment. Every day spent developing a game, you burn more and more money. And that means the game's break-even point is pushed higher and higher and higher. So eventually, you might find yourself in a situation where you haven't even released the game yet, but you already know the business is not going to work out. And finally, number five, constantly changing direction and pushing your people through endless crunch burns them out. But who would give a shit about that, right? So, you want the final stage, the production stage, building of content for your game to run as smoothly as possible. So how do you do that, and why so many developers struggle with it? Or perhaps a better question would be, what do you need to run production as smooth as possible? Now here's the really important part. Everything I'm gonna list now needs to happen before you enter production stage. Obviously, you need to know what content to build. What's the scope of the game? How many levels, guns, enemies, whatever you need to build. You should also know what is the structure of your game. So, how many game modes you have, do you have levels, do you have missions, quests, and how it's all connected together. By this point, you should also have your core gameplay figured out. And by that, I means it's actually exciting to play and it delivers on the experience you promised. If you have a story, you need to know what the story is about, who the main characters are, who the support characters are, what are the character arcs for each one of them, what are the main plot twists. Obviously, at this point, you need to have your art direction ready. That was understanding the scope. The next thing you need before you go into production is to have a detailed plan on how you're going to build things and in which order. And ideally, you want to have your milestones oriented in a way that each milestone delivers something significant to the player experience. or increases the quality of elements in your game. At this stage, you also need to know what it takes to build each element of your game. Before you go into production, you need to have all the tools and pipelines figured out. And on top of all this, you should have measured how much time it takes to take each element of your game from an idea to release quality. And of course, you need to know what is the release quality for each element of the game. Does it mean that you go into production having all the answers? No. But, and it's a very important but, on top of everything I've listed before, all those things that you need to have before production, you need one more thing. You need a list of risks, list of questions. What is it that we still don't know that can stop us from executing as quickly, as efficiently as possible in the production stage? And even more importantly, you need to have a plan on how are you going to find out, when are you going to find out those answers, and what are you going to do if things go sideways? Basically meaning, here's how much time we still have for experiments, here's what we're gonna spend it on, and here's what we're gonna do if we cannot deliver. So basically, here's where we cut. So before you go into production, you meticulously prepare for all the things you know you don't know. So the only risks left are the things you don't know you don't know. But now we need to talk about the elephant in the room. You see, as ridiculous as it may sound, most teams get in trouble because they go into production without having answers to all those fundamental questions. You see, if you do everything right, the production is easy because at this stage, you already figure out your game. You know what makes it exciting, you know how to build it, and you have everything you need to make it happen. If you did your homework, you actually have a tiny piece of your game that pretty accurately represents the final product. You just need to make more. Okay, that doesn't sound like rocket science, so why the hell so many developers struggle with it? Well, there's actually a number of reasons for that. But this episode is getting a little bit long, so we're gonna cover this and how to properly prepare pre-production in the next episode. I hope to see you there.